Mera Anthropos. Welcome everybody to Economica, all about economics and finance. I hope you're having a good time. You all got cracking with Six Nations. What a cracker of a game. It was Scotland with France, 50 to 40 points. It was incredible, and I cannot imagine how all Italian rugby fans, they are elated from this historical win. First time ever for Italy rugby winning against England. That was a cracker as well. So anyways, I hope you are enjoying the Six Nations with all this turmoil going on. And I invite you all, just a couple of days ago, I published a video and I said, okay, global energy crisis, etc., etc., etc. But what I want to remind you all, it's this video, this one, the Bank of England shows us how real GDP expands more than with supply, aggregate supply, rather than demand consumption. Why? Because while I was doing my research today to share with you all my nowcast, my forecast of the actual global oil and energy shock for what will be potentially the inflation shock in the UK economy. As I said, I remember that I published this video and I was reading this working paper, which are that are published by the Bank of England. These are staff working papers. Okay, so the Bank of England, the staff in the Bank of England, they do a lot of work, and I'm not publicizing the Bank of England, but in the paper that they published, I remember that I read this paper, and I remember that I read this paper. Why? Because they created basically, in simple terms, a structural model to see through the economy global economic shocks. And then in this model, they injected three variables. One of these variables, it's a global oil shock. So they injected a shock in real GDP or a shock in real oil price. Okay, so what they did, they took the main UK components of the economy, like inflation or GDP, and they injected onto the national economy some global shock. So that's why today I remembered that I read this paper, and I say, oh, why? I can go back to this paper and use the model, and I will show you how I was able, with the help of Anthropic, to reproduce exactly not this model here, but this other paper, which is a structured forecast analysis, which also accounts for inflationary shock. You can see here they use some 2022 energy shock variables, and so they were able to determine what happens into the economy, etc., etc., etc. Why I'm making all this introduction and all these things? Because of reading these papers, and thanks to all the work that the staff of the Bank of England did, okay, I was able, as a humble student, to take the paper, read it, and make something which is actually material, and to have actual concrete results. So these were the forecast that I've been doing a couple of weeks ago. I think, no, I did it in January, with when we got the last inflation data in January, and they all were popping the champagne. So, oh, inflation is 3%. Yeah, hooray! Let's go, Pirates! And also, in my previous content about the global energy crisis, I said, guys, you are all being mistaken, because in January, anytime, every year, each and every year, since ever, the January inflation data is always negative, because we are all full up with the whole eating and moaning and whining and spending and stuffing us up in for the Christmas season. Then that in January, the inflation data, it comes in always negative, but it's always and only one data point which is negative. Okay. And that's what happens. It's a seasonal effect. So I was sure to have, I did know already that in January, when it's in England, in the UK, or it's Germany or Italy, or whatever is the economy that we are considering, you can rest assured that in January the inflation data it's always negative. So I took the monthly data, so forth and so on, and I made the software doing a forecast. Now this forecast, it's what is called technically a univariate forecast. What it means that it takes just one variable and it spits out something, okay? And so basically what we see here, it's a 6 months forward forecast of CPI that I did before the whole mumbo jumbo it's going on. And we had that CPI in January, what was 3.2% or something like that. And here you can appreciate how the red dots, they are slowly, bit by bit, projecting that CPI will be around 2.8% in July 2026. So this forecast was made without considering all the energy global energy shocks that we are experiencing. Okay, that's why I remembered that I had been reading this paper. Okay, you can see exactly these charts which I recorded with the other content, and I explained. I read through the paper and I say, okay, I just noticed that real GDP, it grows more when we have a supply shock, a positive supply shock, rather than with demand. Okay, and that was another thing. But I repeat again the same thing. It came back to my mind that there was, you see, world supply shock, world demand shock, world energy shock. Yeah, you see here. That's the mumbo jumbo that we have now. This thing, okay? So they published this paper, this research document, back in July 2025. So the central bank does a lot of work, and they kind of, among the all things that they research and study, they kind of usually have to do the usual things. If we have a supply shock, which is the case, world supply shock was gonna happen, okay? So it's to me, it's very, very important that you are watching this video, you understand what I'm telling you. This document of research was published in July 2025, and the central bank did a profound study of what would happen to world inflation, or to UK CPI, energy, or to GDP, or to the interest rate, the bank rate, whether it's a world supply shock or world energy shock. Not that they knew before, but they did a lot of work, and they are sort of prepared. They have models, they have data that they prepare in advance, beforehand, for any sort of scenario that can happen, which is outside your control, basically. And it's important to me that you understand that what these people do, it's very important, because this is the first line of defense that you have in confronting this situation. And that's why I am a strong advocate for that. It should be economists who should be in charge of organizing the economy and society, okay? And the big issue that we have today is that politicians, they are fucking useless, right? And I'm showing you, because the Bank of England, it takes a lot of shit all the time, which is really a bad thing to do, not because it's not polite, because they do a lot of work. They prepare in advance for any kind of scenario that can pop up. Something that politicians, they don't do. They look at, they just care about what is the poll survey, who is voting where, who is voting for me, this, that, and the other. They line their pockets. Politicians, they are fucking useless, right? So I am a student of economics, and I want to give you the proof that economists, they do good, they study, they research for any kind of fucking problem that can come up and can throw a span into the work, and we are all fucked up. So we all try to forecast for some bad thing that can happen, but we do it with data, and so we are prepared, and we can look forward, and we kind of know more or less what is coming at us and how we have to prepare to respond. That's why, okay, I invite you all to be more, to have more trust, to don't be so skeptical and distrusting, distrusting of economists, of academics, of people who do science, who do physics, who do maths, who do who do people who study economics, science, bioengineering. Just I place more faith in people who work with numbers, who again work with science, they do research, just and try to stay more, be more concerned about politicians that play with words. Okay, they talk, they use double meaning, they use all these kinds of speech and things that they are. Those are all. It's all fried air. Okay, what you see here in this paper, it's actually a research that injected that war energy shock, and it was made in July 2025. Okay, so not that they were concerned that something could happen, but it's a usual thing for a central bank, which is the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve, the ECB, the Bank of Japan, Reserve Bank of Australia. People who work into the bank, they actually work and they produce a lot of research, which in the end it comes to be very useful for realizing material stuff. Okay, and I will show you how it has been very, very, very useful for me and for you that are watching this video to come to a result and to understand what actually does it mean when Brent prices are $90, $95, $100. What that does it mean for the average UK household? What that does it mean when you go to the petrol station, you have to fill up the car or the moped or whatever, the van. if you are the man with a white Ford van, I think you probably you will be quite of shouting and screaming and say, how much am I going to pay unleaded or diesel, right? And those are concrete basic problems of ordinary people. So I am an humble student, and I kind of do some kinky, complicated stuff to understand what are the implications for the ordinary person. Because I am an ordinary person, another human being like many others, okay? So these charts, as I said, I did it before the whole thing went on. And of course, when I take this chart, you can read it with me, it's CPI, inflation on 12 months, we are excluding energy, food, alcohol. No, it's with energy, food, alcohol, and tobacco, but the base price, it's the year 2015. So they take the prices of 2015 as a reference price, and then they confront the difference, okay, with the collection of prices that they get in 2025, 2026, and so forth and so on. So the whole picture was pointing to me that inflation in the UK was going to, in the right direction, was going to become less and less and less, was going downward, okay? Now here we got core CPI, which could eventually, the forecast that I got, it was a bit awkward to say why this thing it's going up. And I had a lot of doubts. There is something that probably in the software, it's the model is not iterated properly. These are all technical things. But for example, the dreaded RPI, right? It's retail price index, this thing. I said, okay, well, in January it was 3.8, and then I see that in February it will be 3.6 or 3.7, and then by July it will be 2.8. So it means that my model tell me that probably down the year, when it's spring or summer, etc., inflation will be less of a problem in Britain, and everything will be okay. So now that I had to change the thing and inject into the software some string of codes and say, okay, if I have a global oil shock, what's gonna happen? So the first thing that I did, I went to the ONS website and I went to research the weight of inflation. So what that means, you know that in the CPI, in inflation, there is food, clothing, energy, transport, petrol, recreation, the pimps, restaurants, I don't know. So inflation is made of a lot of things. The price of bread, milk, so that is food. Then the price of clothing. And then there is the price of energy, the price of utilities, the price of transport. And every and each category of this, it has a weight attached to it. So you have an index which the total is 100. So we give a weight of 20 to food, of 15 to clothing, of 30 to households, energy, utility, of 20 to transport. And so energy, it has a percentage or a weight for which it weights on the overall inflation data that you get from the telly, from the custodians, right? And so I went on the ONS website, and I had to find the table that showed me the actual data of how the inflation basket is created. And we have it here, okay? So households energy, it's a big component of the CPIH basket, you see? Very, very simple, okay? It's way easier than listening to my broken English. Then it's way easier to see it on the screen. It's very, very easy. So I go on the honest website without making any disaster. Time is a disaster. Time is the master. Time is a disaster. Right? So CPIH basket weight, January 2026, and you see energy exposed. And for all the things that are into CPIH, the red bars are the parts where any global energy shock, then it tends to push up the cost and then inflation. So transports, you need petrol, unleaded, and diesel, and all that kind of stuff. So you fill up the tank, and then I think you got to the petrol station already swearing like a dog, probably. I can tell you that petrol in Italy now, 1 liter of unleaded, it's €2.20. It's more than €2, right? More than €2. And diesel, it's somewhere around €1.90. It's a lot. Now, I mean, 1 liter of gasoline unleaded in Italy and probably in France, it will cost you more than €2 per liter. Okay, just 1 liter of unleaded of gasoline, it's €2.15, €2.20. It depends on where you pop up and you find the petrol station is going to rip you off, of course. So transport, it's a big component of the weights of the inflation basket. Then you have housing energy. Housing energy, it depends from heating oil, which is diesel, right? And from gas. Gas is a huge problem because also electricity prices, which are linked to gas, they have a 30 over 1,000 weight on the inflation basket. So here we have total CPI energy weight, it's 5.8%. And the total CPI energy exposure, energy exposure is almost 31%. So on the whole inflation data that you get from the custodians, like you pull up on Sky News and they will tell you, oh, inflation is going down, and all the usual crackers politicians, oh, we are doing the right thing, and they play with words. But they ain't got a clue what they're talking about. Huh? And I'm showing you like 30% of the whole inflation basket, it's priced from energy. So you know straight on, right? If energy prices go up 30%, they bang on inflation, and then you will see that inflation will start to rise again. So what did I do? It's basically take the data of Brent prices, WTI, the American petrol, right? I took the data, the daily data. You go on the Yahoo Finance and you take the daily series, every data, the opening price, closing price, the motherfuckers, all that kind of stuff, right? And then I was able to make work together the inflation data that I have with the volatility of prices in energy, and the result came up with some interesting results with material forecasts that I can give you just in a minute. So here we can see something which is more, it's not complicated, it's very, very easy. So here we have, these are the chart here, okay, where the cursor here, it's CPI versus core CPI, okay? You see what is the line, what was the inflation since 1988 or 1989? Every quarter, you have all the data of past inflation. Okay, you see the recent line, you turn the curve and it was going downwards. So we were, oh yeah, inflation in the UK, it's fine, etc. Now this red line here, it's weight adjusted energy inflation. So basically it calculates it adjusts the historical data for energy, and it shows you for all the past data up to January 2026 what is the level of inflation adjust only for the energy component. And you can see here it's 2% here. Okay, so the energy component that accounts for some 1%. Okay, so now you know that if CPI or CPIH it's 3.3%, some, I don't know, 0.7, 0.9 or 1%, it's energy. So on 3% inflation, 1/3, right, it's energy. Very, very easy. So on this scale, it's easy to understand that for all inflation, again, 1/3 component of inflation is energy. So it's easy to understand that when oil prices, energy prices, they go out of the rock and we are all nuts, then it's, of course, you have again another inflation shock, right? And here we have some other charts which are not complicated. So it's able to measure the volatility of energy. Now you see these long lines upward. These are the volatility, the past volatility, what happened in 2022. So now we know that when we go forward, and we'll see the volatility of February, March, April, in all 2026, it's nowhere near what happened in 2022. But prices are very high. I can tell you now it's the weekend, and on Friday, WTI, the oil prices, the United States, the price was $91. Now the market is closed, but there is the weekend market, which you can find somewhere, and WTI prices, they are now around $94, $95 a barrel. So it's for sure that we're going to have $100 for oil. Okay, $100 for global oil WTI, and Brent will be way more than $100 per barrel. So these charts, as I said, they are useful. I won't keep you long. The red shadows, it's crisis, okay, energy shock. And this one here, this big one, is 2022 and 2008, all right? So there was a Gulf War back into the early 2000s, right? And so you have the red shadow there. There was an energy shock before the 07-09 crack on, right? So I think there will be another red bar around this early 2026. I don't know. Here we have energy, core CPI spread, etc. So now let's go to the actual forecast. Okay, here I have the OLS regression. It's more complicated. I will keep it for me, no problem. So let's go to the substance, what it matters, right? So here we have a little breakdown of what may happen, right? So we have a mild disruption or a big disruption. Like, I don't know in which situation we are now, because the Strait of Hormuz is closed and Qatar said, okay guys, no more gas, no more oil, no more fucking around. You ain't gonna get anything, right? This is wonderful. This is wunderbar, right? Okay, so unless there is a method of patrolling the Strait of Hormuz to keeping it open, this situation is going to be difficult to solve in the near term. Like what I'm talking about, having ships, cargo ships moving through the Strait of Hormuz, whether it's goods, whether it's energy, if there are no methods for patrolling, okay, for having the Navy, which it's surveilling the Strait of Hormuz from any incoming fire for merchant ships to go through, then there is no way any energy supply can come off Qatar, whether it's gas, liquefied gas, or oil, and get into, I don't know, into Europe or United States or in Britain. I mean, that is the problem. So the strategical point of all this situation, it's finding a method which requires force to patrol the Strait of Hormuz no matter what, and we will have to try to keep it open and make it safe somewhat to navigate for ships, because those are international waters. So we have the duty to do that in a certain, in a sense. I mean, there are provisions in treaties that you have to. I mean, you are responsible for keeping international waters which are viable for ships to navigate. Okay, so not any bad actor can shoot on merchant ships, because it's a violation of maritime treaties or something like that. No, I'm not an expert. I hope that I make the point. So with the Strait of Hormuz closure, we are on a big red bar. So we can have a mild disruption, moderate crisis, or a severe energy shock. So nothing goes through. So that's a severe energy shock, and something like on the scale on the 1970s, which is 27 points on CPI inflation. I don't know. It's not easy to translate these red bars into an inflation measure, but we will do it in a second. And as usual, the direct consequences are for housing, energy, utility bills, transport fuels, and food processing, which requires, but anything, industrial production, manufacturing, anything involves energy. So the cost of anything will go up. So now here we start to have some little data of what could mean. Okay, so a mild disruption would mean that CPI can be expected to be 3.8%. So instead of going towards 2%, inflation will start to go up again, even to 3.8%, which is again a lot. It's a bit of a problem, and we would expect the Bank of England will have to write a letter to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, because inflation is above 3%, so they have to, for the formality of the Bank of England, which is responsible for price stability, the Chancellor of the Exchequer would be able to say, okay guys, you need to send me a letter and explain me what's going on, right? And that would be very, very funny. So these numbers, they are a bit way too high. Okay, so sorry about that. So let's go forward with something which is way more concrete and easy. Okay, so here we see in the past days how hyperbolic has become the chart of Brent and WTI. Latest data was $90, and in the past 3 months, only for 2026, this puppet, it has increased by 24%. Brent, it's gone up by 22%. I can tell you that WTI at the minute, it's between $94 and $95. As the market opens, it will go to $100 no matter what. You ain't stop this puppet, and it's going to pop big time. The other big problem, it's natural gas, because we have electricity that is linked to natural gas. Even if you go to Amsterdam to the exchange of where they price energy, they are all swearing because it's a bit of a problem. And then you have heating oil, which is a proxy for heating oil. It's diesel. Okay, when you see the price of heating oil, you kind of know what is the price of diesel, right? And so these charts, you can see how the line goes straight up. Yeah, it's a kinky upward, hyperbolic, blue pill. No matter what, I ain't gonna stop. This is going to be really fun. So here we got to the actual material nowcast forecast in the casting of forecast that I managed to put together. Know this mumbo jumbo. So what do we got? Very easy. The normal thing is that CPI inflation in 2026, instead of being 3%, it will be around 3.7, 3.8%. CPIH could go back up to 4%. Core CPI 4.67%. RPI 4%, even higher. And the charts, they have the most precise point, and then they have these bars which are a range of possible data that you can get. So there is a point estimate. So I do get the percentage that roughly could be in the next 6 to 9 months or 12 months, so forth and so on. But here CPIH nowcast March 2026 whatsoever, and it tells me, okay, the most precise data point is that CPIH, it can go up again to 4%, and then you can see how large is the range bar, even as far as 5.5%. That depends on the global energy shock that we will have to confront with. Okay, because that is not here I have the UK data, but I also have Euro area data, I have United States data, so it takes time for me, hours and days to do this work. Okay. Anyways, so RPI, the data points 4%. You see how large is the range, and the core CPI very, very high, 4.67. This is a bit unusual because core inflation, it excludes the food and energy component. So it's a bit unusual that the data point it's that high. But nevertheless, the guesstimate at the minute is that the overall inflation headline number in 2026, it could be going back up to 3.5, 3.7, 3.8%. Okay, and these are the range. What scares me the most is this RPI range. It accounts for a 7% RPI, and that means that the global oil shock, it's something somewhere near the 1970s shock. Now, here we get to the most beautiful thing, because you can see with me BOE structure forecast analysis, which has been exactly taken from this paper, a structural VAM model, Michel Pfeiffer, July 2025. So I took the paper, I went through the paper, and we have here a structural VAR, okay? And what did I do is basically to use the same methodology to impose a variable, which is the it's the energy shock, what we saw before. Okay, so we have a global energy shock. What did I do is basically use the same methodology and take the Brent, WTI, natural gas, heating oil daily prices and make it work together. You see, downloading energy futures, 6,000 days of more than 6,000 days of daily prices, and I make it work together with the UK inflation data. So I have the ONS, we have together the ONS, CPIH, CPI, blah blah blah, this, that, and the other. We make it then interpolate with the heating oil, WTI, Brent prices, natural gas prices, and then the puppet comes up with something. And it's very interesting, although it's a bit more complicated. So here again, it shows us what are the past data up to January 2026. And we know that CPI was 3%, CPI with the energy shock or with the energy component 2.8%, something like that. Core CPI 3.1. Okay. Then what it does, it basically develops all the charts that show us what happens when I have the model. It's SVAR, SVAR. Okay, what it means is a structural VAR. Okay, it's a structural thing which is not the VAR of football. See, VAR, full sample VAR. Right? Okay, so this method is very interesting because instead of using the shock that you imply on the economy as a temporary thing, a one-off, right? It basically utilizes the variable, the global energy shock, as a structural shock. So it means that it stays there, and it becomes a feature of the economic system. So here we have the response function. Once we the variables that we have generate an impulse, then we have a response function which shows us in the charts what actually are the projections in the following months. Okay, so okay, so here for CPI you can see that you have a rise in demand and then you have a slump in demand. Okay, and on this side here, which is the y axis, okay, you have 0.2, 0.4, 0.6. Okay, now if we, and you see here supply, the line starts from negative, so it shows us when there is a negative supply shock. It means that the supply of gas and oil is not coming in and so the supply shock is negative. What the fuck, right? Okay, so negative supply shock, you have a negative monetary policy shock, which it's the monetary policy response function of the central bank. You have a negative energy shock. Now what it's nice to see is that basically if you compare CPI here and CPI with the energy effect, you can see that the numbers on the y-axis, basically they are much larger. So we are 1, 1.5, 2. It means that the demand shock, the initial demand shock, it's 1, 1.5, 2 standard deviation. And the supply shock, it's minus 0.8, where it's way larger. And the energy shock is 1 to minus 1 standard deviation. And the monetary policy shock is minus 2 standard deviation, then it adjusts. So what that means that basically you may have people queuing up at the petrol station, so you have a huge demand shock also in as a reaction. So people, they start to go to the supermarket and they start to hoard for food and flour and basic staples because they are concerned that then there may be shortages or there may be supply shock. So food is not coming in, supplies are not coming in. So what happens, and it's already happening, people, they are hoarding for food in the supermarket. And also, probably in Australia, it already happened, people, they are queuing at a petrol station because actually there was, just a few days ago, as usual, because politicians are fucking useless, right? There was a question in the Australian Parliament, and they say, "Oh, how many days we got left of oil as a reserve stockpile?" And somebody came up and say, "Well, we get something like 20 days." While the oil reserve for Australia should be, I don't know, 30, 50 or 60 days. But because there's a lot of geniuses who take decision for others, even Australia, they have something around 20 days left of oil reserves. And the Aussies, they're already queuing at the petrol station and they are trying to fill up the tank before gasoline runs out and prices basically go through the roof. Okay, so literally what happens, you have a hoarding or a demand shock in the near term, and then demand, basically you see here, bang, it collapses. Why? Because there is a negative supply shock, stuff does not come in, supply is not coming in, right? And you have shortages of goods coming onto the shelves, and then prices are high, and that means that you have a negative monetary policy shock because the central bank, what they can do, they are forced to increase interest rate. That will be a huge problem, right? And that's basically what plays out into the economy. Now, when we that's the other thing, okay. When we see for real oil, you can see how demand for real oil is high at the beginning and then it collapses. And also supply goes down. So you have a negative shock in supply because, again, the Strait of Hormuz is closed, refineries, Qatar, it's not working, gas is not producing, oil is not drilling, supply is not coming, ships are not moving, and they are taking perhaps 10, 20 days more because they have to go all around South Africa and so forth and so on. And so that's what then shows into the chart. So here the red line is the supply. You can see that there is supply and then it goes to zero. And then the shock of zero supply, it propagates for 6, 8, 12 months going forward. This is important because then it shows up in the most precise forecast that I can give you. Okay, that's the negative energy shock. It's minus 10 or some some wild percentages or standard deviation, and so is the monetary shock or the monetary policy shock that you have, because it's a very difficult thing to confront with, because the central bank, they can they can give you money, guys. They can say, okay, we lower the mortgage rate, stuff like that, but they cannot print, they cannot come up to your house with the tank of unleaded petrol. Okay, that's not what the central bank can do, right? They cannot come to your house with a basket of goods and say, okay, I just came from the old China and I brought to this couple of things. Okay, the central banks, they can give you cheaper money, they can set interest rates, so forth and so on. They can say, okay, we can suspend mortgage payments for, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, something like that. I mean, but when there is a supply shock, an energy shock, which is outside, it's in the Middle East, what the central bank can do. That's why here you have this huge monetary policy shock. Now you see how this supply shock, how the bar, bang, it's down. And you have also a demand shock, okay? And these are measured in standard deviation, which are huge, are really unusual things. Energy shock, minus 10 standard deviation, because it's a large energy shock. Now we have all a series of charts which are complicated. We will not go chart by chart because it's it's complicated, but it's the you see the bar has different colors. Each and every colors, it accounts for the percentage component of the forecast that it's projecting. So what is the percentage component of demand, of energy supply, the energy shock, supply shock, each and everything that we have. So here we get to the Mambo Jumbo. Here we have. Okay, so what do we have here? It's actually what I'm trying to tell you. It's going probably to be inflation in Britain in the coming quarters, right? So we have that CPI was 2.8 or 3% in the first quarter. With no new, if petrol, WTI, if Brent prices were $75 per barrel, so no shock, nothing, nothing changes, but so you can think about 3% CPI. But when we take $95 per barrel, we are already in the most prudent and conservative way. The lowest estimate that we can get is 3.3%. If we inject the energy factor into the CPI numbers, and we know that energy components are 1/3 of the whole inflation measure. Okay, so 30% of the inflation basket, it's based on energy prices. We saw it a couple of minutes ago. Housing, energy, transports, food, processed food, so forth and so on. Okay, there is no need that you all know this better than me, because you pay utility bills and you can sit by yourself. But on a quantitative measure, 30% or 1/3 of the inflation basket, it's weighted on energy. So no shock, 4.2%, 5.5% CPI by Q4 2026. Now, the most important thing that we need to consider and to to factor in, okay, to bring forward, is that this thing is not going to go away in 2026, right? So what I'm telling you basically is just when these people, they come up on the casters and they go, oh, don't worry, we're going to do this, that, what the government is going to do for us, blah, blah, blah. And somebody will tell you, oh, don't worry, it's a temporary thing. No, guys, listen to me. This thing, you know that inflation, cost of living in the UK, it's gone on for months, for years, right? So this other global energy shock is going to go through even 2027. That's what my models are showing me. You can see it in the line, okay? It's going to peak as things stand, okay? And oil goes to $90, $100 per barrel, okay? And stays there in the next 1 or 2 or 3 months. It means that we will have a peak in oil prices And if and when this situation is resolved by spring, summer, I don't know when it's resolved, because we are looking into the future. So what I'm telling you is that this thing is the energy prices, they are going to be a cost into the economy even in 2027. That's a problem that everybody will have, even everywhere, especially in Europe. I mean, in France or in Italy. In Italy, gasoline, it's €2.20 per liter. It's more expensive than in England. So in Italy, it will be the energy shock for the Italian economy will be a huge problem. And this will not be something that in a couple of months in 2026, oh, we're all gonna get it sorted, right? You're sorted, no worries. No, this is going to stay into prices even going in 2027. And the peak of the top, or the peak of the energy crisis, will be somewhere in 2026. You see, the line goes up and then it starts to move lower in the following periods. So between summer and autumn, okay, in the back half of 2026, you have the peak of the energy prices in inflation, and then slowly goes lower. So it basically throws it jacks up inflation again, and it's somewhat of a structural thing that happens. Okay, it's not well, it can be a cyclical, but in this model it's considered as a structural feature. But these are complicated stuff. Well, each and every line are the graphical expression of each and every scenario. Okay, so the scenario that we have here is that if we have a 60% spike in oil, so we see that crude oil goes to $120, okay, then there is the risk that inflation, just CPI, can print as high as 7%. That would be humongous. That would be incredible. I don't know what the ECB will can do. I don't know what's gonna happen. I mean, people will be with there will be a lot of turmoil even in the central banks, because it will be very difficult to go through this situation. I think we will be again into a 1970s stagflation scenario. Okay, so after a lot of efforts that any single human being has done in 2022, with cost of living, we're still having the consequences of the cost of living, so forth, bang, another thing again. And so be prepared that this whole global energy shock, it's going to be in 2026, and also is going to be in 2027. So slowly, so you'll have to repeat again the same thing. So wait for 2027, 2028 and see inflation data to absorb the energy shock. Okay, so here we have the CPI with the energy factor. Okay, so it's this chart here. Okay, IFA. Too much fat. You see how is the red line up in a severe scenario when global oil supply is priced to $120 WTI. How then the inflation data that you get on the custards, it starts to be it goes through the roof again. Moderate scenario, we are around 5% inflation. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to be exactly as it is, but the risk is that we are going to see a resurgence of inflation in 2026 and in 2027. So that's why the cost of living, it's a structural feature. It's not a cyclical feature. Inflation, it's a structural component of the socio-economic fabric of any society, in any country. Okay, it's not a cyclical thing. There are trends and trends are with something which is with fashion. I like this thing, the new iPhone, the new pair of trousers, the new sneakers. I don't know. So there are trends in goods, in consumerism, but the inflation, it's a structural feature. Okay, we pay inflation for each and everything that we go in the shop, tap in, boom, inflation, bang, you get it hammered, right? So that's the whole thing. That's the most precise forecast that I'm able to come up with, and it's not pretty. Okay, the the easiest that it can be in Britain, it's like 3.6, 3.7% for a severe spike in oil prices, north of $100. But if this energy component it becomes more problematic, inflation it can go to 5, even 7%. I don't think it can be 7% unless it's a complete global oil shock. But I would not be surprised to see CPI which is more than 3%, even 4%. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Here there are other charts, etc. I can tell you that there is so much material that it's complicated for me to make it concise and easy in a short period of time, so that you can see just what it counts. Okay, so these are my nowcast forecast. We have 3 or 4 different scenarios: baseline price, moderate spike, severe global oil shock north of $100, and there is also the scenario of price collapse, which would be very nice if oil will go to $50 a barrel and everything gets resolved in a couple of weeks. That would be very, very good. And don't be surprised if inflationary costs in Britain, but also in Italy or in Spain, France, Germany, wherever, they will be a feature of the daily shopping or going to the petrol station for the coming months. And in the worst case scenario or the probable scenario is that this cost of energy shock will peak in 2026 and it will go down again in 2027, so forth and so on. So thanks a lot for watching the content. If you can, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, you are very welcome, and I'll see you